Hello, it's Friday the 21st of March 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, we've got Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Mark Anderson and Liz Evans. But we're going to begin today with Heathrow and, of course, one of the world's busiest airports. It's now been closed as the result of what is described as significant disruption after a fire at North Height substation in Hayes in West London. Heathrow doesn't seem to be offering a bus replacement service, we note, by the way. But anyway, the fire was reported at 23:23 last night and was eventually brought under control at around 6 o'clock this morning. Lots of homes in the area, thousands of homes without power. But perhaps a surprise to many is that Heathrow Airport is also without power. But maybe not such a surprise if we look at the airport's documentation, because power supply resistance doesn't seem to be a massive priority for them. But before we get that, let's look at Flight Radar 24 this morning, and we can see a total of no flights. If we looked at this the same time yesterday, lots of aircraft around Heathrow Airport. But let's look at this document then, Heathrow Airport's Operational Resilience Plan. Now, this is back from 2014. And as I say, power supply resistance doesn't seem to be a massive priority for them, because this document does not include the words electricity or supply or power or generator or any reference to the topic at all. Well, almost no reference anyway, because it does tell me that components of important applications are split across two primary data centers, and that both data centers have dual power and networking feeds with strict change and access management regimes. And that's it. Nothing about airport lighting, radar, air traffic control, or other flight operations. Nothing said about backup power at all. So this was published in 2014, as I say. Maybe the situation has improved since then. Well, not really. And we can find out if we go to the Heathrow's net zero plan. And I'm sure you can see where this is going, because, of course, they're focusing on biomass generators. If we just zoom in on a little bit, 2012 they brought in biomass fueled combined heat and power plant. 2017 they purchased 100% renewable energy, and that's how they've been supplying energy to the airport ever since. Well, solar panels on Terminal 2, and of course those worked well overnight, didn't they? So continuing work to replace diesel generators, well, that's continues to work to be one of their priorities. Now, look, the point we got to make here is that London is one of the 100 resilient cities, and resilience is one of the key buzzwords of the net zero globalist crowd, and it's in every document they publish. But it clearly means something different to whatever you or I may expect it to mean. And the question then is this an example of Britain's crumbling infrastructure once again, or is there something else going on here? Is it through a lack of investment? Well, apparently not, because the CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, was reporting back in 2023, in March 2023, a £3.6 billion investment, which included, are you ready for this, more resilient infrastructure? Well, apparently not. So there we go. But don't worry, it's not all bad news. The AI is still up. Because we'll just move on to this. The Register here reporting that the local commercial data centers, at least, did have backup power generation capacity. I'm going to say we're going to need to get used to this, especially anyone who lives anywhere near Starmer's amazing AI corridors, because those data centers, the new ones that are about to be built, are going to get first dibs on any electricity supply. And if there's any limitation, it's going to be homes and other businesses that are going to suffer first. But, this looks to me, Patrick, to be just another great example of net zero in action.
We also have to be careful. There's not too many Teslas driving around in that vicinity either, because they sort of draw down on the power supply, don't they?
Well, they do.
It's not very sustainable, is it? The whole electric car thing, isn't it? Is it not?
So, we have the situation. And Liz, let me welcome you to the program. I believe your husband was halfway across the Atlantic when this happened?
Yeah, I have a deep personal interest in that, because I was expecting him to land at 7 this morning. He rang me at 7 and I said, "Oh, you've landed." He said, "Yeah, but where have I landed?" And I said, "I don't know, somewhere in England." He went, "No, I'm back in Montreal." So he got halfway across pretty much exactly and landed back in Montreal at exactly the time he was due to land in England. And now he's got to do some sort of crazy trip to Paris later tonight and then across on the Eurostar to get back home.
So there we go. Why on earth a piece of critical infrastructure like one of the world's biggest airports did not have backup power?
Well, they had biomass, apparently. What exactly is biomass, by the way? Are we talking wood chips, reclaimed chip oil from the local fish and chip
Yes.
shop? Like, what is biomass?
All,
What are they
all those things.
What are
Yeah,
they talking about?
exactly.
Silly.
All those things.
Absolutely silly. So that was a big success, wasn't it? The Green New Deal.
It was indeed, and it continues to be. But Liz, let's move on to you now. And you've got an update for us on the assisted dying bill. And the question in my mind is it going to pass?
Well, I'm very hopeful, actually, especially after a very disastrous committee stage, that in fact it won't pass. But yeah, I'm going to give you an update on the bill. It is the Kim Ledbetter's Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill, in case you're not aware. And it's known as the Assisted Dying or Assisted Suicide Bill, more accurately. And you may remember it had its second reading in Parliament on the 29th of November last year. So a lot has happened since then, and there's far too much to cover today. So I'm just going to highlight a few key points. And for more detail, you can read a recent article that we published on our UKMFA Substack, or you can go to the campaign page on our website, which will be in the show notes, hopefully. So to start with a bit of background, UKMFA strongly opposes this bill. It violates a fundamental tenet of medical ethics that a doctor should first do no harm. Legalizing doctor-assisted suicide would profoundly change the relationship between a doctor and patient and the state and an individual, as death would be sanctioned as a legitimate treatment for suffering and pain. And Hippocrates put strict ethical boundaries around medical practice to guard against doctor-induced harm. And this included the doctor's pledge not to administer a poison to anyone when asked to do so, nor to suggest such a course. So last autumn, Dignity in Dying ran a huge public campaign promoting the bill with mass advertising in the media and London Underground, and they had celebrity endorsement in the mainstream media. And the message was that this is a compassionate bill with the best safeguards in the world to prevent unbearable suffering at the end of life by offering a quick and painless doctor-assisted death to anyone with a terminal diagnosis and fewer than 6 months to live. However, most palliative care consultants don't support assisted dying, and they argue that with high-quality palliative care, no one needs to suffer an agonizing or undignified death. And they advocate for more resources for hospices and palliative care services. And those opposed to the bill also cite the real-world evidence that a slippery slope is inevitable, as eligibility criteria will widen and safeguards will be dropped, that the vulnerable will feel a duty to die for fear of being a burden, and that the reality of an assisted death is often far from painless or quick and can involve significant and prolonged suffering. So on the 29th of November last year, crowds on both sides of the debate gathered outside Parliament, and those of us opposing the bill included disabled rights groups, Christian groups, and healthcare professionals. But regrettably, MPs voted the bill through, 325 to 275 votes. So the bill moved into the committee stage for further scrutiny and to consider amendments. The third and final vote in Parliament will be on the 25th of April, so not long, before it passes into the House of Lords. So the committee commenced their hearings on the 21st of January. They met every Tuesday and Wednesday, and this stage was completed 2 days ago, despite 5 more sessions being available before recess. Even the mainstream media have criticised what Laura Dodsworth has called the ghoulish haste and apparent determination of the proponents to rush it through at any cost. So moving on to the committee of MPs selected by Kim Ledbetter, they were heavily weighted in favour of legalising assisted suicide. There were 15 for and 8 against. But despite this, the MPs opposed to the bill, but in particular Danny Kruger, Naz Shah and Rebecca Paul, they did a magnificent job of putting Ledbetter and the bill under intense scrutiny and challenge. They submitted multiple amendments to try to rectify huge flaws in the bill, but nearly all of those amendments were rejected. So moving on to Kim Ledbetter, she had promised a rigorous scrutiny of her bill, but the committee stage has raised serious concerns about bias and a marked dilution of safeguards. Watching the discussions revealed that legislating for a safe system of doctor-assisted dying is a can of worms of extraordinary complexity. Many who initially supported the bill are now expressing alarm at the reality which has been laid bare over the last 7 weeks. It became clear that the bill is riddled with holes and is unworkable. It simply cannot be made safe to prevent coerced or wrongful deaths. But worse still, Ledbetter and her colleagues appeared to lack the will or desire to tighten the bill's safeguards. And instead, one by one, crucial safeguards were removed or rejected. And the slippery slope that us campaigners had warned about played out in real time before the bill is even passed into law. So Ledbetter showed a worrying lack of respect for the democratic process. Her committee initially met in private to discuss which expert witnesses to call, which prevented public scrutiny, and the witnesses they called were heavily skewed in favour of the bill. Unbelievably, the committee initially voted not to hear evidence from the Royal College of Psychiatrists, despite their vital role in ascertaining capacity and assessing for coercion. There was a public outcry which forced Ledbetter to U-turn and give the Royal College an opportunity to give evidence. Then no witnesses were called to represent disabled rights. And again, public pressure and action by disabled rights groups led to another U-turn, and Disability Rights UK were finally called to give evidence. But other vital voices, such as the British Geriatric Society and even the government's chief suicide prevention strategy advisor, have not been allowed to give evidence. The involvement of a High Court judge was sold to the public and wavering MPs as the strongest safeguard in the world. So it was appalling that it was quickly dropped in the committee stage, considered unworkable as it would overload the court system. This massive change to the bill outraged opponents, and a group of 26 Labour MPs issued a statement expressing their disgust, calling it another broken promise, showing how haphazard the process had become. It was replaced with a 3-person assisted dying review panel consisting of a lawyer, social worker and psychiatrist, and overseen by a voluntary assisted dying commissioner. Yet no impact assessment was offered or evidence that the panel would be workable. And already eminent psychiatrists and the British Association of Social Workers have warned that their professions don't have the capacity to populate these panels. The operation of the panel is opaque. Kim Ledbetter admitted that the panel is neither a judicial entity or a court, so evidence will not be under oath. Danny Kruger has pointed out that it will also not provide a clinical assessment of the applicant and is therefore a quasi-multidisciplinary team at the wrong stage in the process and for the wrong purpose. And then moving on to the panel requirements, they are meagre and inadequate. And this was pointed out by Sir James Mumby, a retired High Court judge. They are only mandated to hear from one of the 2 doctors and the patient, but they are not required to question either. All this will be done remotely by video or even audio link. Then an amendment was rejected to give a family a legal right and route to give evidence or share concerns with the panel. And this means that family members are completely excluded from the process, which is very sinister. They don't even have to be informed. Appealing the panel's decision only works one way. The patient can appeal if their application is not granted. However, if it is granted, a third party who disputes the decision cannot appeal. This slide shows some examples of the multiple safeguarding amendments which the committee rejected. They also voted against excluding people with anorexia, Down syndrome, autism, and learning difficulties, and from preventing doctors from raising the option of assisted suicide with 16 and 17-year-olds. Even an amendment requiring all applicants to be referred to a palliative care consultant was rejected. And an amendment requiring a doctor to ask the applicant why they are seeking an assisted death was rejected. Supporters of the bill argued it would infringe the person's autonomy to take a legal course of action. And MP Rachel Hopkins stated it was basically none of their business. We agree with Danny Kruger that this diabolical bill must be halted. The third and final parliamentary vote is on the 25th of April. Only around 30 MPs need to change their vote to defeat the bill. So we are urging the public to contact their MP ASAP to urge them to vote no. And there are useful template letters on several campaign group websites. And better still, ask for a meeting to discuss your concerns. I'm going to give the last word to Danny Kruger, who made the powerful point that this will not just enable a small group of people access to a doctor-assisted death, but instead will impose on everyone this new reality, will change life and death for everyone, introducing the idea that our individual worth lies in our utility, valuable for only so long as we are useful, not a burden, not a cost, not making a mess. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Patrick, you got a question?
Yeah, Liz, where does the, do you know where the Church of England or the Catholic Church stand on this issue? And if so, has anybody voiced any of their concerns from the clergy side of that community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My son's actually at a Catholic school, and last year I was really heartened. In November, I went to a service in their abbey, and there was a statement from the Catholic Church out on the front for people to, pick up a leaflet, basically expressing their strong opposition to this. And I think most Christian I haven't checked the Church of England position recently, but I'm pretty sure that they are against it as well. So, and very much the Christian groups like Christian Concern, the Christian Institute have been running big campaigns against this.
Okay. Interesting.
Liz, thank you very much. Liz will be joining us for Extra after the programme, so we'll be talking about this a bit more then, I'm quite sure. Mark, let me welcome you to the programme. And, big news from the United States this week has been the release of the latest batch of documents on JFK's assassination.
Oh, absolutely. And I've got some basics just to kind of lay the groundwork on this. I've seemingly been covering a lot of JFK lately. Back November 29th, late last year, I had covered a conference virtually in Dallas. And then I talked about JFK again, February 28th, after the February 21st death of Clinton Hill, the Secret Service agent that jumped on the back of the Kennedy limo. So here we go again with Kennedy stuff. Now, this first slide, just to lay the basics here, putting it on the screen. Going back to this one's from the National Archives. This is the official announcement, the 2025 documents released in accordance with President Trump's directive, March 17, 2025. As of that date, the directive was longer ago, January 23rd, I believe. All records previously withheld for classification that are part of the JFK assassination records collection are released. The National Archives has partnered with agencies across the federal government to comply with that executive order issued in latter January, number 14176. As of March 18th, just a couple of days ago, the records became available to access either online via the National Archives, or you can actually go in person to College Park, Maryland. And one of the complaints that I've heard so far, including from David Denton, an Illinois professor and JFK researcher that heads up the JFK Historical Group that gave that conference that I covered last November. There's no search engine and there's really no annotation. There's not a lot of categorization. So it's just a huge spew of data that's very onerous and time consuming to go through. That's one of the things that's the reality right now. But supposedly there's going to be a search function and a better organized way of looking through the files. The government is promising that. So we'll move on and look at this for just a moment. What it consists of mainly, generally speaking, is Section 10 of the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. That's kind of the basis of it. It addresses information under court seal or for grand jury secrecy. That's part of the data dump. And Section 11 of that same Records Collection Act addresses records with tax return information, et cetera, et cetera. And on the 18th of March at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, there was 32,000 pages or a little over 1,100 PDF files released. And then later that same day, 18th of March, 31,400 pages. And again, almost 1,100 PDF files. So in total, it's 63,400 pages that were released. So it's a quantity thing. It's only a question of the quality. And what I've been hearing so far from a couple of researchers, not just Mr. Denton that I've talked to, is that it's not likely, at least it doesn't appear likely, that it's going to lead to any smoking gun or any major breakthroughs. It's a lot of miscellaneous, a lot of things about the Cold War, a little bit about Vietnam. But one thing I did get from David Denton, and we'll put this up, is that under the 2025 release, the agency being the FBI, the Professor Denton sent me this yesterday when I talked to him on the phone. Mark Lane, the noted researcher who brought out a pretty penetrating book not long after the events in Dallas, he was put under surveillance, as that slide indicates. He was speaking in Switzerland, promoting his work, and the CIA, their approval was needed. So they were surveilling people that were investigating the events in Dallas and second guessing the Warren Commission. So the CIA had him under surveillance. And then there was another document that Mr. Denton shared with me. And this one had to do with an author by the name of Thomas Buchanan. And this was actually from an earlier release of JFK files. We need to remember there were several releases, I believe 2017 and one or two subsequent to that, prior to the one that just happened this week. So authors, according to Professor Denton, authors that were looking into this thing early on were put under intelligence surveillance. And it also came out that a Gary Underhill, also named as John Garrett Underhill, he was a CIA asset, an agent. He made his name and you might say cut his teeth during the World War II era, which was the earlier version of the CIA before the CIA was officially created in 1947. And he felt that there was CIA involvement in the Dallas retirement plan, quote unquote, of JFK. And he felt it was a clique or a faction within the CIA, not the CIA as a whole. At least that's what's being reported. But there's a memo in the new data dump that strongly suggests that Gary Underhill was silenced by the CIA itself and supposedly committed suicide in his Washington apartment due to the knowledge he had of this supposed clique within intelligence that might have had something to do with the Kennedy affair. And he was known to be right-handed, but reportedly the self-inflicted gunshot wound was behind his left ear. That's one of the documents or one of the revelations that's making the biggest stir right now is the case of Gary Underhill. So these are some of the things, surveilling authors that were looking deeper into the affair, the Gary Underhill caper, also of interest. And from there, Larry Hancock, a noted JFK expert and author, I haven't heard much of his stuff, but he had something very interesting to say. He's talking about the fact that, yes, over 63,000 pages were released, but in this video, what he'll explain is that there are private collections that we may never see. And people always think, well, the National Archives has all the answers. They've gathered everything. But according to Larry, who's pretty respected in his field, that's not the case. There are private collections and many things that are off the grid, not available, and may never be available. And maybe we can listen at this point as to what he had to say.
Officially, with this release, it's done, because the whole collection that was, all the agencies, everybody that did the investigation and inquiry did it and sent it to NARA, the National Archives. One document that does not include some 2,300 either documents or pages. We're not sure yet, because they didn't say, that the FBI found a couple of weeks ago and said that they were giving to NARA that had not been part of the collection before. So what we've seen so far is material that was already at NARA. Beyond that, we could give you a list. We've actually prepared a list of dozens of files and dozens of pieces of material that could be collected that might help resolve the question, but that's not part of this. So what we really need, there would have to be a reset to collect new information. That's not what we're getting now.
So as you can see, there's a lot to be learned, not only because the existing data dump is hard to navigate, but there's many other things that we may never see, or at least it would require extra effort, maybe an act of Congress, whatever, to get these additional items, because it's really a qualitative matter, not a quantitative matter. Yes, we can look at documents about Martin Luther King, yes, about Vietnam War machinations, all sorts of things, plots by the mob to kill Castro and poison him, which is supposedly reportedly in the latest data dump. All these things are, of course, of interest, curiosity. But if we don't get to the core of what really happened on Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, then it's just more misdirection, throwing a bone to researchers so they can chew on it for a while, and so on and so forth. So we Americans have to demand quality, not quantity, and perhaps follow what Mr. Hancock is suggesting and get these things that we otherwise might not see. So with that, I think Patrick has some things to add.
Sure. Yeah, it brings up a couple of important points we're going to segue on. And first of all, what's important to understand is what's been dumped, or what Trump has signed to release, is actually just a small percentage of the total amount that came through the 1992 JFK Act, or the Records Collection Act. So that's we're not seeing everything, and there's still a lot that's there even on the government side. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, this gets to the core of the JFK debate. You've got the who and the how. Who pulled the trigger? How was he killed? Was it 2 shooters, 3 shooters, 1 shooter? But then you have another question, which is the why. The why and the motivation behind it. And that, to me, personally, is the most fascinating one. And I think we have quite a bit of evidence in this dump that inadvertently or not points to the why, to the motivation behind this. Now, I'm going to share this clip with you. This is from a C-SPAN clip from a few years ago. This is Martin Sandler. He is the author of Letters to JFK. He's talking about some of the things that he discovered in his book back then that absolutely corroborates the evidence that we found in these files as well. That many of them, by the way, have already been accessible. So these aren't all classified documents that Trump has signed to release. But anyway, listen very closely to this clip.
There's a very surprising series of letters between Kennedy and David Ben-Gurion, not only the premier of Israel, but the founder of Israel, in which they're very angry letters, in which Kennedy is saying to Ben-Gurion, I'm killing myself trying to get a nuclear test ban treaty. I've even got de Gaulle on board, and that's impossible. And you keep testing in Dimona. You've got to stop. And Ben-Gurion, thank you, in so many words says, it's easy for you to say sitting in Hyannisport. I'm sitting with the Arabs all around me, and you want me to give up nuclear testing. And Kennedy threatens him. And he threatens him in such a way that Ben-Gurion resigns. And I will tell you that I found articles, not in any crackpot publications, but in very sophisticated publications saying, forget Lyndon Johnson, forget the CIA, forget Fidel Castro. The Mossad killed Kennedy because they were so upset over what he did to Ben-Gurion.
No, that's quite something, Mike. So right after David Ben-Gurion, Prime Minister of Israel, resigned, very soon after, John F. Kennedy was murdered. Okay, so the timeline of that is quite compelling. Now, let's go up and look at some of the evidence that has surfaced and also just people's comment on it. This is Anya Parampil here. She's an excellent journalist. And what she's saying here is quite striking. When JFK's mistress, Mary Pinchot Meyer, was murdered in 1964, and it goes on to point to this WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks has been going through these documents as well. James Jesus Angleton, top CIA officer, working almost exclusively for and on behalf of the state of Israel. And that's what we find in here, Israeli intelligence service. So, and again, these are pinned on my timeline, so you can go to @21wire and see some of these documents. But this is one of many mentions of Israeli intelligence in context of the John F. Kennedy assassination. So this was a thing at the time, and it does pop up. And there are obviously other documents that we aren't going to have privy to on this. And that's just for starters. We'll go on here. Here's another one. Take a closer look here at this particular document here. And this is an interesting letter, Mike. This is about the Chicago mob. And a lot of people aren't aware that Kennedy, he was meant to visit Chicago, but that trip was canceled, likely, possibly because of security threats. There may have been a chatter about a possible attempt on his life through the mob. Okay. And they say, quote here, "We now have plenty of money and our new backers are Jews," meaning Israelis probably. And as soon as, quote, "we or they take care of Kennedy." So it's right there in print. So that's the mafia talking, basically. And these were cables basically disseminating that information. So this is highly interesting. And here's more. Other mentions here of Israeli intelligence. And we'll bring in another document here. And so the story gets very interesting at this point. And you can kind of see that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes between the United States, the Soviet Union, and Israel. Okay, because Khrushchev at the time, you have to remember, wasn't particularly massively pro-Israel, but was also trying to work with Kennedy on this nuclear test ban treaty. So, and Israel was holding it up, basically. So that's quite another interesting one. Here's another file worth looking at here. Unredacted Church Committee exposes CIA's secret role in atomic weapons transfer, arming Israel with nuclear technology against JFK's wishes here. The unredacted files reveal that Mr. James Jesus Angleton from the CIA confirms that atomic technology or knowledge was transferred to Israel. And again, you have to go through a lot of these documents to try to parse out what you're looking for here. But this is really the piece de la resistance. Mike, if there's any further questions, what do we have here? James Jesus Angleton from the CIA and the head of Mossad Global Operations, Mayor Emmett, in 1966, posing in a kind of dubious cowboy outfit there. I'm not sure what that was all about. But suffice to say, Mike, that Angleton they had a forest named after him in Israel after he died. He was almost given somewhat of a posthumous state funeral, not unlike another super spy, Robert Maxwell. So, Jesus Angleton was a Gentile. He wasn't Jewish like Maxwell. So this is very odd. Now, so there's a great documentary film. We're going to play a clip. It's called NUMEC. It's by Ryan Dawson, an independent documentary film. And this is just a very small snippet, Mike, but let's go ahead and listen carefully here.
Despite the well-established and well-known precedents of Zionist smuggling and stealing boatloads of armaments from the United States, and the indisputable evidence of Israeli intelligence agents regularly meeting with Zalman Shapiro in Pennsylvania, a dedicated and committed Zionist with ties to the Israeli government, as well as hundreds of kilos of highly enriched uranium being reported missing from NUMEC and unaccounted for, the highest out of every commercial plant in the United States, and Israel having a covert nuclear program, which they lie about at every turn, undermine inspections of, and the very suspicious samples at Dimona of highly enriched uranium that was measured with scientific certainty, which the Israelis by themselves could not develop. The notion that highly enriched uranium was diverted from the United States to Israel was challenged.
So the evidence of this is overwhelming, and we'll put up on screen here. This is the documentary film that we showed you this clip from. It's called NUMEC. It's about this nuclear facility in Pennsylvania, but also the bigger plot of the Israeli secret nuclear weapons program. And to this day, it's undeclared. So they're completely exempt from any international inspections or anything like that. But you can watch that film on Rumble for free. It is a fantastic, very well-researched piece, and I have it on very good authority from veterans within the intelligence services, Mike, in America, that the data and the information in NUMEC, this film, is solid. Okay, so this isn't, we're not in the realm of conspiracy theory here. We're into the realm of conspiracy fact. And the case overwhelmingly points, and I think it will be increasingly so, that there is a very high probability that the motivation, doesn't matter who pulled the trigger, whether it was the Italian mob, the Jewish mafia, or the CIA, or some Cuban stooges, okay, what was really behind that? The motivation to get rid of JFK ultimately is coming from the Israeli interests. Okay, he also wanted Israel to register with FARA as a foreign agent for the lobby, IPAC, at the time. And of course, that all went away after Kennedy was killed, and no more talk about the nuclear weapons program. And oh, by the way, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president that assumed control of the White House after Kennedy was killed, was involved looking the other way with the USS Liberty incident during the Six-Day War, when Israel attacked and almost nearly sunk, but killed over, 40-odd U.S. sailors in cold blood during the Six-Day War, and then denied it, basically. And to this day, they still don't want to acknowledge really what happened that day. So again, a lot of behavior changes in policy happened after Kennedy was killed. And again, that's a circumstantial case that I think you can build. Certainly, it's very strong, whodunit sort of narrative here that I think will get more and more interesting as time goes by.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that. But 60,000 documents to be trawled through. This is just taking the lid off the first few that have been seen so far. So plenty more to see, I'm quite sure.
There's enough out there. I think if you connect the dots now, a lot of things will make more sense. So, and again, that might be an inadvertent or intentional, who knows? I'm not saying it's 5D chess by Trump, but now there's a lot of people visibly panicking the fact that people are talking about this now, supporters of Israel. So I'm just saying it's very interesting to observe the different reactions to this information.
Okay, let's move on then. And if you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, support.ukcolumn.org is the place to go. And you can make a donation there if you would like. You can join as a member, which gives you access to various benefits. For example, UK Column News Extra, which will be running straight after this news program. Pick something up at the shop if you can, because that helps us greatly as well. And if you are needing some health supplements, the link on that page will take you to clivedecaro.com. We do get a small percentage of anything you buy there. So thanks to Clive for that. But if you can't do any of that, that's absolutely fine. But please do share the material that you find on the UK Column website. We need your support with this because, of course, we are absolutely subject to the censorship regime, which we're going to come on to in just a second. Another reminder of the UK Column on Location event happening on Saturday, the 5th of April, 2025 in Cheltenham. Catherine Gunn, Alex Thompson, Patrick here, and Raja Mia will be speaking at that. Brian Garish will be speaking at that. There'll be a Q&A with the UK Column team. It's going to be a fantastic event. Very few tickets left for that, but if you can come along to it, please do. And the interview with Chris Burgard, yesterday at 1 p.m. went out. That is now on the UK Column website. So Brian is speaking to Chris Burgard, who was present at Capitol Hill on January the 6th. So if you haven't seen that interview, have a look at it on the UK Column website. Now, let's move on then, Patrick, to the sort of censorship regime. And we've seen in the UK the terrorism legislation being used against anybody that is campaigning on behalf of Gaza. But in the United States, the same kind of thing going on.
No, major case, and it got huge political implications, major headlines as well. This is the case of Mahmoud Khalil. He is a Palestinian activist who was going to school at an Ivy League school in the United States and has been arrested and is scheduled to be deported based on his participation in campus protests on behalf of the Palestinians. You would call them anti-genocide protests, pro-human rights, pro-Palestinian. But the government, the Trump administration, is calling them pro-Hamas protests. Of course, it's all about how you frame it. Of course, we'll bring up on the screen here. This is a Guardian op-ed. It was actually published yesterday or 2 days ago. This is from Mahmoud Khalil himself. He says, "I am a Palestinian political prisoner in the U.S. I am being targeted for my activism." He is a graduate student from Columbia here. He's been sent to Louisiana, Mike, away from New York City, kidnapped from his family, and then locked up in Louisiana, scheduled for deportation at the behest of Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. So now there's been an appeal. It's in the courts now. Judges halted the deportation. So we're into the judicial process. So we'll see. Let's look at some of the statements that he's made, though, up on screen here. This is a quote from him that he said within this article. Of course, if we bring that up on screen, the quote. Oh, there we are. Yes, the quote there. And so this is what he says. "My arrest was a direct consequence of exercising my right to free speech. I advocated for free Palestine and an end to genocide in Gaza, which resumed in full force on Monday night this week. It has resumed. Israel's resumed the bombing of refugee camps in Gaza." He says, "It is our moral imperative to persist in the struggle for their complete freedom." Now, I've labeled him a Palestinian political prisoner held in the U.S. because by international law, he is a political prisoner because there is they cannot prove any criminal case against him. And U.S. officials have admitted there is no criminal evidence of any crime being committed. It's all basically guilt by association or a political labeling here. And he goes on, "The Trump administration is targeting me as part of a broader strategy to suppress dissent. Visa holders, green card carriers, citizens alike will all be targeted for their political beliefs." So it's very hard to argue what he's saying here. And so this is where the debate is right now. And we'll show you what some of the other people are saying. But just understand, let's get the facts here of who Mahmoud Khalil is. Okay, so he's a human rights activist and a protest mediator accused by the Trump administration of being, quote, pro-Hamas, is being detained by immigration agents as we speak. A 30-year-old Palestinian born in a refugee camp in Syria. So his family was pushed out of historic Palestine during the Nakba of 1948. He's a child of one of these families. So that's a very interesting profile. Master's graduate from Columbia University, I think international studies. Okay. Coincidentally, the head of his department and someone making the case against him is a former Israeli intelligence agent, a female, which is coincidental, I guess, so to speak, but we'll see. Green card holder, married to a U.S. citizen who is also 8 months pregnant with their first child. So this isn't an illegal alien, and this isn't someone on a student visa. He is there as a legal resident of the United States. So this is kind of an interesting case. And we'll go on here to mention he happens to be, this is interesting, a former employee of the British Embassy in Syria, which is located in Beirut, obviously, because the U.S. and the British embassies were kicked out or left Damascus after the uprising in 2012. And he was administering the Chevening Scholarship Program, which is a very kind of prestigious British sponsorship of certain political or artistic or thought leaders or influencers. That's the way I look at the Chevening Scholarship.
Absolutely. It's buying people's loyalty to Britain, really, in many ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like USAID has a lot of these programs. Right. The British Council does. So not uncommon between the US and Britain, or the EU for that matter, to basically try to back and sponsor talent or people. So he was definitely on side with US and UK on the Syrian issue and probably pro-regime change in Syria. That's by the by. I did not find any evidence that he's a spy, but there's a lot of accusations of that online. or that he is involved in the regime change operation itself in Syria. I did not find any evidence. But even if I did, Mike, even if I did, that would not change the material importance of this case. And this case is really about the First Amendment. And this is, speaking of the First Amendment, here's a constitutional expert basically saying here that removing foreign students for supporting terrorism. This is Adam Kissel, a supposed expert on the issue of constitutional law. He's dropped the link here from the Heritage Foundation. And so, yeah, he's all about free speech, due process, and the Constitution. He's got the flags, U.S. and Israeli flags in his bio, also a Christian cross. Interesting. But here's a journalist that Elon boosts here, who really wants this person. His name's Nick Soter. He's one of Elon's favorite journalists. He's saying that this is about participating in criminal pro-Hamas riots, and that we need to remove these people from our country. They're charged with crimes, and we need to send them all back, basically. So pro-Palestinian demonstrations are now pro-Hamas or pro-terrorist riots. And these are people who hate our country. So to support Palestine means you hate America, according to a lot of people on the right. That's got 4.5 million views, 4.6 million views there. So that's the state of journalism, Mike. And I just have to remind people that even if you're an illegal alien in the United States, you're protected by the U.S. Constitution. You're protected by the First Amendment. You can say whatever you want under the First Amendment, as long as you're not yelling fire in a crowded theater, inciting violence, or providing material support for a terrorist organization. I can see how those would be falling foul of the law. But the purpose of the U.S. Constitution is to restrain the government. So the government cannot prevent you from exercising those rights. And this is where a lot of people, conservatives and people on the right, just like people on the left who were canceling people during the Biden administration and under Obama, calling for people to be canceled and to be deported for their speech for the January 6th protests, the same people on the right who were victims of this types of cancellation and woke behavior are now attacking people who are supporting the Palestinian issue and calling for them to be deported, totally against the First Amendment. So I think a lot of people, Republicans and people on the right, don't understand their own Constitution. And they're really making a sort of political position on this. And it's so funny, they're as woke as the left. So we're calling this, Mike, the woke right. The woke right. As woke, in fact, worse than the left, because they're total hypocrites, because they themselves have been targeted with this sort of political authoritarian, speech control. And now they're doing it against people they don't like on behalf of a foreign country, Israel, which I find to be highly bizarre. But then again, that's just how things are today in America.
Are we going to play this little clip?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I forgot about that video. So this goes to show you how ridiculous the charges are. This is a conversation between an NPR journalist and one of the Trump administration officials on this.
So how did he support Hamas? Exactly what did he do?
Well, I think you can see it on TV, right? It's this is somebody that we've invited and allowed the student to come into the country, and he's put himself in the middle of the process of basically pro-Palestinian activity.
So what is the standard? Is any criticism of the Israeli government a deportable offense?
Like I said, I think that at this point, when he was entered into the country on a student visa, at any point we can go through and evaluate what his status is, and the Secretary of State
is any criticism of the United States government a deportable offense? Is protesting a deportable offense?
Like I said, you're focused on protesting. I'm focused on this visa process. He went through a legal process, came into the country.
Are you saying that he lied on his application? He's a lawful permanent resident married to an American citizen.
I think if he would have declared he's a terrorist, we would have never let him in.
Right. Okay. Well,
I mean, for me, it's case closed. I mean, they're completely out of order on this. The Trump administration, Marco Rubio, the press, the right-wing press, Fox News, and everybody else, completely And in fact, they're doing more damage to the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law in America and the First Amendment, freedom of speech, than anybody right now.
Well, yes, that is true. The UK, though, must be well up there in many, many ways. Similar kinds of activities going on here. But let's have a look at the latest on the Online Safety Act, which, of course, came into force officially this week. And as we've been warning about for months, the final switching on of the Online Safety Act has already had a massive chilling effect on freedom of speech in the UK. Dozens of smaller online forums have shut their doors this week for good, because as I've been reporting, the administrative burden on them is equal for everyone providing so-called user-to-user services, whether you're a billion-dollar corporate like Meta, Reddit, or X, or whether you're a small independent news organization like the UK Column, or whether you're a totally voluntary-run online forum. And one of the first to go is this organization, Microcosm, which is a forum hosting platform. So this organization was hosting a lot of other small interest group based forums. So they've been taken out. And one example is the hamster forum. So anyone that's interested in hamsters has been closed down. But they've decided to move on to Instagram and therefore into the arms of Meta's moderation regime. So because they can't afford to run a moderation regime that Ofcom would consider acceptable, they've shut down their forum and they've headed off to Instagram into the arms of the big corporates. It's not just in the United Kingdom. In Finland, Lemmy.zip forum is blocking access to anybody that lives in the United Kingdom so that they are not falling under the auspices of Ofcom. And Ofcom itself, its position is really pretty obscene. The costs of complying, they say, are likely to be negligible or in the small thousands at most. So this is just a massive disconnect here. Voluntary groups don't have small thousands to pay for this kind of compliance, and they don't have the people that are qualified to provide this kind of compliance. And I just find this situation absolutely obscene, because small organizations, voluntary organizations, community groups being forced into the arms of the big tech companies, to the big tech regime, while at the same time we have HTS posting snuff videos on a daily basis from Syria on X and on Meta and on other platforms with no problems apparently from Ofcom.
Not only that, they get a glowing visit from Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, for their efforts of running a pogrom in Syria. But this is a clear case, Mike, of the government using legislation to force compliance, and that compliance is going to cost a lot more money than most of the people targeted can afford. So, I mean, there should be a class action lawsuit here against Ofcom if everybody got together. But it
might be happening. Let's not.
But it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. It's just utterly ridiculous that a voluntary forum would have to fall under, after being free and being allowed to talk for 30 plus years. In some cases, 30 years of free speech. And all of a sudden in 2025, we're going to shut that speech down unless you pay thousands to go into this moderation regime. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody interested. I don't think the hamster forum was likely to have HTS activists on there. But anyway.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely. Now, we were talking about Readiness 2030 on Wednesday. You've got an update on this?
Yeah. Well, we thought 2030 was going to be the year of the Great Reset, right, Mike? Well, they've changed it. They're doing a workaround here. It's Readiness 2030, as you know. Ursula von der Leyen's warning, Europe must rearm and plan for readiness for 2030. This is when the clock is going to run out for civilization.
Yes.
Apparently. So we need to mobilize all of our resources for 2030. How are they going to mobilize all that money and that capital and that investment? How are they going to do that? Well, it's interesting. We did a little research here, and the EU is planning to use the savings of citizens across the European Union to collateralize it, their savings, to use that and activate that savings, mobilize that savings. 10 trillion euros, in fact, of total savings there. So the EU covets savings to invest in its rearm Europe plan. Or you go down here, this is at 21stcenturywire.com. We've got the document, Mike's, the Savings and Investment Union, as you can see, very colorful happy clappy marketing. See the little piggy bank there? That's you and I. We are just a citizens savings
If
piggy
we're lucky
bank.
and have any savings.
So they're talking about basically a type of a bail-in, basically. So they're going to use, here's the document, they're going to use everybody's savings and they're going to weaponize it in order to pay for 350 billion euros per year to mobilize to help Europe's defense. So, and to create investment flows, as Ursula von der Leyen says in there, to unused savings. They're calling it unused because it's in your account or Joe Public's account. It's unused. So this article is basically saying, get your money out of European banks ASAP, because what happens if there's a financial crisis? What happens? This is like Glass-Steagall, lifting Glass-Steagall kind of on steroids, Mike. So they're really taking one of the last barriers out, which is that your personal savings is no longer your personal savings.
Right.
It's going to be collectivized across the European Union. Now, if they're allowed to get away with this, I'm sure this idea might be coming soon to other countries. And this is exactly what they're saying for the Green New Deal. We need to unlock those pensions. We need to unlock these funds and these sort of entitlement funds because they're not doing anything. The money's just sitting in accounts collecting interest for the people. How greedy of them. We should use it to save the planet and to invest in green tech, to start this green revolution, to rearm Europe with green technology. This is the same exact script. It's one crisis, same script. Next crisis is Ukraine, same script. 2030, unlock the savings and potential, unlock the pensions. It's exactly the same. These people have no new ideas. And so as long as there's a crisis, they're going to go for whatever they can get their hands on.
Kleptocracy.
Call it what you want.
Yes. Mark, let's bring you back onto the program. We're going to end with Japan and vaccinations.
Yeah, a very interesting and troubling situation. This is from the Children's Health Defense, and it came out just yesterday, 20 March. After 3 children died within 24 hours of routine vaccines, Japanese researchers are sounding the alarm. Written by Michael Nevradakis, PhD, citing the deaths of 3 Japanese children within 24 hours of receiving routine childhood jabs. The authors of a peer-reviewed study are calling for a re-evaluation of the, quote, risks and benefits of currently approved vaccines, and also a review of the childhood vaccine schedule, childhood vaccination schedule. So we'll move on from there. This is from the CHD, citing that study, the need for validation of vaccination programs. The authors of this peer-reviewed study, as noted, calling for a reevaluation of the risks and benefits of currently approved vaccines. The study, published March 14 in Discover Medicine by Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, a cardiothoracic surgeon at Okamura Memorial Hospital in Japan, also addressed the increase in post-vaccination adverse events following the introduction of mRNA COVID-19 vaccines in Japan. So these deaths are causing quite a stir. And we also have some other critical information here. I'll cite this just to make sure we get it right. This is breaking news, basically. The risk of immunodeficiency associated with frequent messenger ribonucleic acid mRNA vaccinations, which aren't really standard vaccinations, has become increasingly evident, leading to the widespread discontinuation of additional doses, except in Japan. Reevaluation of vaccination programs, including live attenuated vaccines, is crucial. Recently, those 3 cases of children dying a day after routine vaccinations were reported in Japan, but despite detailed information, including autopsy findings, so-called experts concluded that a causal relationship with vaccination could not be ascertained or could not be evaluated. So there's resistance going on in terms of attributing the deaths of the children to vaccines and therefore carrying out a more thorough cautionary policy regarding vaccines and reevaluating the whole vaccine process. But anyway, much more could be said. Time's getting a little tight today. One of the things that was cited in the study, this is from the study, the growing evidence of immunodeficiency risks associated with frequent mRNA vaccinations has led to the global discontinuation of additional doses, Japan being the exception. The decrease in immunity can be caused by several factors, such as the spike protein, lipid nanoparticles, and so on. But one of the things that came out, Mike and Patrick, as I read through this, was now they're thinking that the rise of measles and other illnesses that are being reported might actually stem from vaccinations to some degree. So now they're talking about measles vaccinations. They're talking about increasing cases of the measles in Texas and elsewhere around the world. And there's at least some evidence being cited, some of it may be a little tentative in this study, that the recurrence of measles, such as it is, might be from vaccinations themselves. So a lot more is going to come out about this. It just came out yesterday. Since it came out from Children's Health Defense, we'll hope that Robert F. Kennedy, now the head of Department of Health and Human Services, that he'll take notice of this, that he'll take heed of it. But this could lead to significant reevaluation and significant scrutiny of the vaccination regime that so far has caused such misery and harm and death across the world ever since the COVID scam. So we'll see where this goes, but I'm sure there'll be much more in the days and weeks ahead. We'll keep a close eye on it.
Oh, just one note. What's interesting is that the symptoms for measles are also identical to some of the exact symptoms of adverse reactions from some of these vaccines, which I think is worth pointing out. And, you know, the mRNA, people need to look a lot closer at the mRNA technology, because it has not, it's been able to skirt any kind of regulatory framework through the emergency use authorization. And the only immunity that's being provided by mRNA is the immunity from prosecution for these companies pushing it. There's no proof at all, clinically or otherwise, that these mRNA vaccines do what they say or what they claim that they have are supposed to be doing. There's absolutely nothing. They've been giving almost a carte blanche because of COVID, and they still have the same emergency use authorization. So you have people like Robert Malone and running around saying, I'm the inventor of mRNA, but the inventor of what exactly? Because as far as I could see, that product was dead on arrival before COVID. So was Moderna as a business. And all of a sudden, as if by magic, woo, with the emergency use authorization, mRNA everywhere. So, I mean, people need to attack the technology and say, does it actually do what they claim that it does? Because that's also a big problem in all of this. People are dazzled by this idea of mRNA tech, but it's not really proven tech at all. And so, and meanwhile, it potentially is causing harm to millions of people. What a disaster.
Absolutely. And of course, Stargate and also the AI programs in the UK are linked to the use of mRNA.
Oh, it's all predicated
personalized medicine for,
miracle
for cancer,
tech.
Miracle cure for cancer.
They're calling it miracle technology.
Undoubtedly, we will talk about this in extra in a couple of minutes' time. I'm going to say thank you very much, Patrick, Mark, and Liz. We will be back, if you're a UK Call member, for extra in a couple of minutes, as I say. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and we will see you at 1 p.m. as usual on Monday. See you then. Bye-bye.